Listen man, it's the final night class, so you know we had to come in and go out with a bang. Today is when we find out which of the 3 classes really has the most sauce. There's Prototype Cu, with a different version of his Gaebulb, his piercing crimson lance. This one is pretty straightforward. It's exactly like the current Gaebulb we have now, minus the special effects, and it's even shorter than it was before, less dramatic. All around, it's just the same Phantasm, but more lackluster. Rightfully so. Admittedly, I would also want to see them redo this. The Proto Gaebulb and the original Gaebulb, like the one that Cu does in the series, are different and they should be showcased accordingly. We got Romulus coming in, putting on for Rome. With his Phantasm, My Love Reaches All, he straight up summons his own bounded field, the same one that's said to have taken out his own brother. FGO has manipulated this and allowed him to use it as an attack as well. This is a dope play on his background. I feel like it gives the vibes of him being some type of elemental user, maybe an earthbender of some sort. The way that it comes out and it attacks the enemy is very unique, and if it wasn't for the fact that he was an older servant, I could see a lot of people being more into this than they are now. Then we got Diarmuid. Yes, it's the Deer Man, with his crimson rose of exorcism and yellow rose of mortality. The fact that he's using 2 spears by itself puts him in his own lane. We see a purple and yellow flame in the background. The yellow flame slowly starts to transition into green. Really nice touch. He launches himself at the target and then he combos the enemy with bow spears using a chain of attacks. The hits then start to leave behind what appears to be a green vortex. Ideally, I do like what they have set up here in terms of foundation, but it's way too short for such a dominant Phantasm. It needs an extension, and a little more emphasis on the combat wouldn't hurt either. We got Mr. One Punch Man himself, Cu Chulainn, with his God Spear No Second Strike. Immediately, the Phantasm kicks us off with him charging his energy, flames starting to surface around his body, as well as different shades of purple dancing around him. He finally opens up his eyes, leaps towards the target, stuns them with the tip of his spear, then hits them with the dramatic slow motion progression and puts them down for good. You can also see the energy behind this hit being transferred from his body into the edge of the spear, and it comes out through the other side. I do enjoy the more bare bones type of feel that they were going for with this Phantasm. He is the type of servant that drives that lore, but I would still like to see more tricks with his spear before he finally goes in for the finish. I feel like the build up and the intensity would make it that much more satisfying. One time for the head of the Fianna. You got Fion in the building with his undefeated violet flower. He starts off spinning his spear, waves of water circling around him, the background even changing to match this with the blue gradient. He presses down into the ground to lock this energy into his spear, and then he starts to absorb it into the edge. He shoots out a beam, and then once it makes contact, it completely explodes against all of his targets. Fion definitely got a much needed revamp to his Phantasm, but considering how much growth there was from the first version, you can't be mad at what he has now. Next up, we got Consort Yu. My girl Yu said the beach isn't the only place where she gets busy. We start off with her doing a spin straight into the air, her spear being honed in on the target below her, and then she starts to manifest a red energy powerful enough that fire starts to burn the tip of her spear. We get a quick close up, and then she drops the accumulated energy on everything that's below her. I gotta be honest, we gotta at least give her some style points for those flips. That can't go unrewarded. I really like the way that the background slowly starts to change into red, more so to exemplify her vampiric nature, and then at the end you got her outright turning the enemy into a blood flower. Here's somebody that you don't see too often, the magnificent Hector. We got him with his Phantasm Durandana or Durandal, the ultimate unbroken spear. He steps back with a pause, holding his index out to the front, and then he starts charging up his spear like a heat-seeking missile. He finally lets it go, and then he hits his enemies, drowning them out in a pool of flames from the impact. I have no problem with this Phantasm either. It's among the leagues of Phantasms that could use a touch up, but as it stands, it's fine for the way it is now. Doesn't do too much, doesn't overstay its welcome, but still manages to look cool at the same time. Moving on over, we got Cu Chulainn, my guy, the ultimate of doggos, the unkillable roach of FGO. For him, we got the gay bulb. His Phantasm starts us off with a quick camera pan, and a demonic aura starts flowing from the top to the bottom of his spear. He quickly leans into his attack, and he moves at a speed so fast that it appears as if he's flash stepping, and then he drives it straight through the target. This is one of the old favorites, though it's still vanilla and it's been revamped. It's just one of those Phantasms that really hit home. It's really satisfying to watch, and although the quickness of the Phantasm is part of the allure, I would really like to see some backgrounds and some close-ups to really take this up a notch. They especially need to implement the telekinetic effect that he uses when he reverses causality. Now you know you can't forget about the homie Benkei. This time we got his pilgrimage of the 500. He spins his weapon around in the air and plants it into the ground as he goes into a Buddhist formation. A gold light starts to emit from his conjoined hands, and then you see him progressively open a spell gate behind him. The target then gets submerged in a countless amount of the seals that come from his religion. Big fan with how they approach this, especially when this was one of the Phantasms that used to be looked at as lackluster. In particular, my favorite part is when he melds himself into the ground when he switches his stance. It's almost as if it's a metaphor to Buddhism or religion in general, and how unyielding you have to be when you decide to take on that type of devotion. You have to remain planted, you have to hold your ground. We got the girl Gareth dropping in to put on for the Knights of the Round Table. For this one, we're going to be looking at her Phantasm, Rampaging Maiden Wolf. The moment that the Phantasm starts, she goes into a fury, just ramming straight through all of her enemies multiple times in a row, following this up with a combo from her weapon, and then focusing her magical energy into the final hit to leave a devastating blow. You know, surprisingly for how short it is, I actually like this one a lot. The only other thing I could say is that since there's not much else to it and it's really straightforward, it would do her a lot of justice to at least change the background or give her some type of aura during her run, just something to give it a little flair. Next up, we got Mr. Three Grails on the loose, Knight of the Round Table Percival, with his Longinus count 0. We start his Phantasm off with his horse picking him up out of the background, the camera slightly giving us a close-up. He then starts to draw his magical energy from his weapon, Longinus. It slowly starts to turn gold, and then it transforms into a dark red energy. He lays the weapon out in front of him and then turns himself into a magical bulldozer and goes straight through everybody that's in his way, leaving behind a tower of light. You know my guy Percival had to come through and get fresh on y'all. Love the dramatic shift that Longinus makes, the direction of his horse picking him up mid-Phantasm instead of him just riding his horse altogether. The whole thing just shows off how fast somebody like Percival can go from 1 to 10 extremely quick. Now you know that it wouldn't be right unless we hit you with a classic. We got Don Quixote, his Phantasm being Dedicate My Spear to You. Right off the bat, you see him go into an immediate charge to highlight his lore, his companion Sancho following behind him, and then even she starts to transform with this golden light surrounding them to highlight that she's also his horse. Don has also transformed with this as well. He's got this all gold armor, and the moment that they finish, they speed blitz straight into the enemy, and then you see the Phantasm pull back and they're sitting down and taking it all in. I think the big highlight here is the transformation of Sancho and the way that she seamlessly flows alongside Don, and the next thing that you know, they're both going in together. The golden armor is also a nice touch to match the aura. Leading off into the next one, we got Brynhildr, Until Death Divides the Two Apart. She comes in shining with the blue and purple colorway, light orbs rising up from the ground. She levitates into the air and then transforms her entire spear until it turns colossal. She then starts to charge up her newly modified weapon and speed blitz towards the enemy with a close-up. I think the game changer here is when she makes her spear colossal. When she goes in for the hit, it literally looks like she's turning herself into an arrow. You even see the blue and purple streaks around her body to represent this. Next person we gotta get into is Vlad in his Lancer form. For this one, we'll be looking at his Fortress of Impalement. It starts us off with a dark mist surrounding his body. He starts to change his positioning as the Phantasm goes, and once he releases this, you see this red aura along with these lines of electricity jump out of his body, and then you see a whole line of weapons pile off in front of him, impaling everybody that's in the way in the process. Not to mention there's a huge spear at the end and the inverted color palette to signify all the blood. I feel like Vlad gets done real dirty by the community, but that's another case. This Phantasm is pretty good. I think the main problem is, while it is unique, it's not long enough to leave an impression. I think a slight shift in the angles would do a lot of justice, since there's not many other things going on. That alone would really take it up a notch. A star player from Babylonia that will never get enough credit, and that is the beloved Taiga, aka Jaguar Man. Right here she has her great Deathclaw. She starts off with a ritual, a summoning circle appearing at the bottom of her feet in orange. You can start to see these light green dots interlocking in the circle. She goes in for the release, and then she pulls off a colossal flaming hand, as she's mentioned, that's completely in her control. She leans back to put more emphasis into the attack, and then she slams the entire hand down on her enemy. Always a pleasure to see the flaming hand vibe. It reminds me a lot of Ibaraki Doji, but in her own form. That being said, there isn't too many like this, especially when the game is so dominated with beams and close range choreography, and it really makes her stand out because of it. Next up we got Enkidu with his 11 Styles Phantasm. He starts off balancing himself on one foot, spinning his spear around like a helicopter, and then he transitions into the 11 styles that he's familiar with in terms of spearmanship. All of these clones having this dope purple aura layered on top of them, and then they all combine and come back to him. From that point, you can see his defenses are bolstered and the aura grows even stronger, and so does he. Really like Enkidu's background. It's really a shame that a person that's as skilled as he is doesn't really get the light of day, especially when it comes to his spear technique. The same thing can be said right here. Definitely needs to be longer. Definitely should have been an attack over defense Phantasm to highlight how skilled he really is. And who could forget Kagetora? She's got her 8 phases charge formation. Right off the bat, she kicks it off with her jumping into the scene with her horse, and then repeatedly she runs straight through her target multiple times, each time representing one of her phases that she mentioned, and then finally she comes in for the big impact, the big flame hit to seal the deal. I do like the element of these attacks in succession. She attacks back to back so fast that it almost feels like she's cloning herself, but this is just part of her mechanics, and it just fits the scheme really well. But unfortunately, not too much going on beyond that. Here's another one that you don't hear about too often, Qin Liangyu, and she's got something to say with her poem of altruism. The scene immediately transitioned to her up on the mountains. She starts to assume a kneeling position as the poem slowly drops into her hand, and then we see the markings of these 4 poems lightly dashing across the screen. She dashes off of the plateau that she was standing on and gets reinforced by these writings in a ridiculous flaming aura that towers above her entire body. Usually I'm not the biggest fan of these types of phantasms, and I do mean the writings, but I feel like hers is right on point. It doesn't feel jarring. There was a good selection of scenery, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, and the dramatic shift accentuated the phantasm instead of holding it back. Circling back around, we got Lancer Artoria with the infamous Brongo Miniot. We see Artoria and her horse go extremely high into the clouds, suspended in the air. Apparently they can do that. You faintly see a bunch of waves of light surrounding her that represents her charging the Brongo Miniot, and then she comes down a trail of light, shooting the blast towards the ground and leaving the entire area devastated. And as you can see, even a quick charge had a high area of effect. If I'm being honest, for the level of phantasm that it is, it's kind of mid, both the mobile and the FGO arcade version, especially with how extravagant they have it in the show. show. But when you come over here, you're not getting the same energy. I'd even say the alter form is better. It really comes off as a watered down version of Karna's Phantasm, and at that point I might as well play with Karna. Needs more individuality, and it definitely needs more emphasis. You know what time it is. It's baby Medusa time. Looking at this showcase, we have her caress of Medusa. We start off with a dark purple mist, almost looking like a cloud at the bottom of her feet, light hints of electricity flowing around her. She then starts to embody a high level of purple magical energy, and then dashes toward her target while this energy is surrounded behind her. She hits the enemy with a combo of multiple strikes, jumps back, and then annihilates everything in front of her with her mystic eyes. This one has always felt very rewarding, especially when you consider that there's people like Gorgon on the palette. Even though Medusa is a 4-star and she's in competition with her higher grade self, she still manages to stand the test of quality and also engage in her own specific way without being over the top. I would watch the whole thing just to see her do that beam at the end. So fire. I present to you one of the many that comes from the Legion of Sakura faces, and that is Parvati with her Trishula Shakti. It starts off with a cherry blossom tree that flows all the way over to her target, and then each petal starts to summon a version of Parvati. You know, Sakura does mean cherry blossom, so that's a very good nod to her name to start off. Each one of these avatars start to combine their powers together, and overhead you can see a giant energy ball manifesting that covers the entire screen. All of her enemies then get completely electrocuted with a huge bolt of lightning via Shiva's trident. Really like this clone aspect that they use, the fact that they're acknowledging Sakura's lore and weaving it into Parvati's, as well as showing just how powerful she is in comparison to other servants. Just the sheer magnitude of this attack took 3 versions of herself, and it looks like it would send you to oblivion. Now you know we couldn't do a list without a little Valkyrie action, all of them showcasing their Ragnarok. We start off with one Valkyrie levitating into the air, then she teleports straight out and goes up into the clouds. She also leaves some feathers behind. Once she gets into the clouds, the rest of the Valkyries spawn around her, giving us a total of 7, and then they all channel their energy together to throw lightning bolts straight out of their hands, specifically Gungnir, which at that point the enemy would get hit multiple times by their bolts back to back. Everybody knows that any season is Jalter season. We got Jalter Lily coming in with her Sing Elegantly for Christmas. The beginning of her Phantasm showcases these swirls of light blue magical energy, and you got the snowflakes pouring out on top. Jalter herself has her head angled down as a method of concentration. She finally releases this, and then the energy within her spear starts to radiate as she raises it up into the air and causes a massive downpour of gifts all over her enemy. You know, I gotta be honest, as a free servant, I've seen this Phantasm so many times, especially running the lotto and years back. Still do enjoy it. That's likely more because of a nostalgia feel when I use her Phantasm, but beyond that, it's still unique by the way of her being a Christmas servant. So since she's seasonal, she automatically gets to put different things in her Phantasm that most people wouldn't have accessible to them regardless. Nice scheme, straight to the point. It's a banger. Looking over at Ibaraki Doji, we got her Phantasm in Praise of Folly. Immediately we see her jump off into a transition where she throws her weapon into the air and it starts to become surrounded in a flaming aura. You can also see waves of magical energy around her feet. The weapon then comes together to form a massive hand, and she launches herself at the enemy and hits them with the uppercut of doom, sending them all the way into the sky and turning them into fireworks. Again, it's Ibaraki, and it's pretty common that she comes with a fire Phantasm. I find this to be something unique to her, and also the fireworks make it extremely hilarious. It's just an aspect that you don't see too often, and her looking off into the distance at the fireworks is a nice touch too. Heading off into the next Phantasm, we got Naja with her fire tipped spear. She starts off using her flame wheels to push herself all the way into the sky. 2 yellow streaks of light at both sides of her. She stops mid-flight and then focuses with the lotus flower unfolding behind her. Once it completes, she opens her eyes and catapults herself all the way down at blazing speeds, so fast that she herself is starting to catch fire. And then she incinerates everything that falls in line with a huge explosion. Again, Naja is another servant that is one of many that doesn't get enough credit. You know, going off her lore, things like her flame wheels, there's so many things unique to her character that we've yet to see in action. Just using these alone was enough to send her into the sky and turn herself into a heat-seeking missile. For our next Phantasm, we got Bradamante with her flashing magic shield. It immediately sends us off into a green gradient. A green aura flows around her body while she stands with her arms crossed. The Phantasm releases, and then she grabs both of her weapons and then encases all the enemies in front of her in a vortex, and then she uses her other arm to penetrate them with the shield that leaves an entire tower of light. This is just one of those classics from the time that it's been released. Really like the stance that she's making when she starts the Phantasm. Super smug with her arms folded, but it doesn't stop her from getting busy. It was also very thoughtful that she loses clothes during the Phantasm just so Type Moon could show us her cheeks. If anybody's looking out for their community, it's definitely them. No questions asked. A classic since the time that it dropped. We got one of your favorite Sakura 5 in the mix, and that is Melt with her Phantasm, Blue Summer Palladian. She starts us off making good work of her costume, going for a dip with her penguin companions. She then uses her authority from the water to raise her enemy up into the air and trap them inside a water sphere, which at that point her and the penguins go in to strike all of the enemies at one time. I'm rocking with this one as well. One thing that really stands out above all is the lore driven attention that Melt is part Leviathan, so she has this type of authority to do these things without flaw, and it's really hilarious that she threw in the costume to take it up even further. Solid Phantasm, and it accomplishes a lot without doing too much. This time around we're gonna be getting into Caenis, her Phantasm being My Great Golden Wings. She starts off by soaring straight at the enemy. A golden aura starts to appear around her body as she closes in, and then she transforms herself into an entire phoenix where she swoops down at all of the targets in front of her. While this Phantasm does get into it pretty fast, I gotta admit that her transformation is something that still sets her apart. The phoenix itself looks amazing, and it really shows off how powerful she truly is. You know, Kiyohime had to come back in it and get into the mix too. We see her using her Fire Dragon Mower Phantasm. It starts off with the scene fading out and then goes into her target being surrounded in smoke. And out of nowhere, Kiyohime drops an entire bell on top of the enemy, where she then starts to roast them and summons multiple versions of her spear and then pulverizes them at the same time. Chef Boyardee style. And then you see several towers of flame shoot up in the background, and they even turns blue towards the end. You know, this is one of the oldies, but I think that Kiyohime still manages to stand up in modern times without doing too much to her Phantasm. It's got its own unique spin to it, and while it doesn't stay for that long, it does get its point across, and it pays a great nod to her lore. I also enjoy that color transition of the flames that she has at the end. Everybody step out the way when a real one's coming through. We got Lancer Artoria Lancer with her Rongo Minion. Can we just get some appreciation for her horse? Love the dark horse aspect with the skull face and the red eyes. You have a dark mist start to come out from underneath them as she begins to charge up her Rongo Minion. Red streaks of lightning appearing all over while she's holding it up to the sky. The thorns that stick out of the side of her weapon start to disintegrate, and then you see an entire purple tornado swirling around them. The tornado then focuses into the weapon itself and swallows the enemies in one foul swoop. This is what a Phantasm is supposed to look like when it's getting the proper justice. Rongo Minion being one of the best weapons, and just by looking at it, it feels bigger than most attacks. Next up, we got Mama Raiko, a true mother of mothers, with her Phantasm Sakura's Vajra. We start off with a purple mist in the background, purple electricity flowing on top of her to match. she begins to hold out both her hands, and then she manifests her weapon straight out of the lightning. And you can even see the electrical currents going up and down the weapon when she does so. She picks it up, and while it's spinning, it starts to charge even more of a current. And at that point, we go into a slow motion transition where she launches this directly at her target. And then they get straight up fried out of the other side. You know, when it comes to Raiko, she's always here to show and prove. She's never gonna sell you short. I really like the emphasis that they put on her when she launches the weapon. It just makes it feel that much bigger. And even just her manifesting the weapon in general gives off this godly vibe, which is perfect for the attack that she's using. It just goes hand in hand. For the next one, we'll be coming in with Mary Anning with her ancient Dorset Phantasm. We start things off with her being struck by a bolt of lightning, the background completely changing to a rocky scenery with her electric boulders in the background. You can start to see a gradient form in the back as well. The boulders then start to glow and completely transform into her own familiars, which at that point she hops on top and they all ride straight through the enemy while she hits them with her weapon. This is another one of those phantasms that takes a lot of turns, though it's extremely short. I like what she did for the time being, especially with the big bolts of lightning and the phantasm itself highlighting that she collects fossils. You can even tell by the way that her familiars are made, they all have this predated structure to them. You guessed it, we got Tamamo Lancer with her everlasting summer sunlight. This is one of the OGs. You know, summer phantasms always do it big in terms of uniqueness. This one is no different. She comes in with her floaty attacking the enemy multiple times. The camera gives us a quick close-up, and then she jumps into the air and gives us a hilarious falling kick with freeze frames that ends up with an explosion. And then she catches the umbrella that she threw up at the beginning for the style points. Tamamo is out here wilding. There's also the green and yellow aura that surrounds her while she's doing the freeze frames. The whole thing looks really nice all around. This is indeed for Sparta. We got the main man Leonidas coming in with his guardian of the flame gate. Just like in the show, I feel like Leonidas is one of the people that you could easily sleep on, but he does have a really good phantasm. He summons familiar variants of his entire army and uses them as a shield to ward off high level attacks. You can even see them doing the same formation, the phalanx, that was said to have been used when he was in battle. You got a couple of really cool angles. You see sparkles come out of his eyes, and then he's completely surrounded by a circle of flame while powering up in this golden tower of light. Next up, we got Brito Mart with her phantasm Tempest Warcry. We start off with these orbs manifesting from her lower side, and then she closes her eyes as she slowly starts to transform. While she's doing this, her sword turns into a spear, and you can see magical waves flowing around her. And then from the spear, you can see a light radiating all throughout the phantasm. She opens her eyes with a new set of wings to complement all of this, and then she dashes towards the enemy and throws an entire energy wave that not only hits the enemy, but turns into a whirlwind as well. You'd be a liar if you said that Brito Mart doesn't always come with the drip. Not only did she give you her suit, but she also gave you two outfits in one. Really like the color scheme here, the fairy aspect that surrounds her, the way that her weapon lights up the entire scene, but in a natural way, and there's just so many curves here. She gives off the impression that her last hit is just the energy wave, and even that starts to transform too. It's almost like it parallels her own character. This time we're gonna circle back around with Vritra, and she'll be using her phantasm, O Demon, cover all the heaven and earth. We quickly start off with her launching herself into the sky. Blue starts to fill the background as she goes up higher, and then you see this black and blue flame start to consume her entire body. We dive in for a better close-up, and once the flame has finished, we see that Vritra has completely transformed into a dragon. My goodness, is this really necessary? Her enemies are already cooking in a black and blue flame, and then she comes up from the background to destroy them all anyway. You know, something that I like about this phantasm is that it takes a lot of turns. When she jumps into the air, it appears like she's going to do some type of attack, and then she transforms. She transforms and she's got friends. The whole thing just comes together with an entirely different approach. my dog, one of the leading faces of the Lancer class, Enkidu, the Clayman, popping out like Rayman. We got Enkidu here doing his Enema Unleash, one of the most famed phantasms in the verse, and the way that he deploys this matches that reverence. He starts off by palming a green vortex into the ground with a golden ore around it, shows off his ability to fly, going extremely high into the air with his chains following behind him, and then they combine and manifest as one massive chain going all the way into space. He comes down with the final hit, and then the remnants of the chains from behind hits the rest of his targets also. Always been a fan of this phantasm. Like I've said before, how many people are going into space? How many people can fly? There's so many things being done here that's only exclusive to a servant on the level of Enkidu, and I think that speaks a lot in its own right before you even get to the phantasm itself, and then you have the phantasm look incredible to boot. It's Grand Lancer Romulus. We got his phantasm path across the universe. He starts off by straight up teleporting into the middle of the sky over his target. The camera gives us a better close-up. He levitates in the air and starts his chant, and then his entire body starts to glow with magical energy. He opens his eyes and a magical disc starts to appear over his body, and then he hits everything below him with an onslaught of magical stakes. But wait, he's not finished with you yet. He then drops the disc on the target entirely, annihilating everything in his sight. Now I could get down with this. This is what a grand is supposed to feel like. Everything about this exudes, I'm just better, and that's the way that it's supposed to be. My guy came out with the teleportation spell, spammed everything in the immediate area, then dropped the disc on him just to flex. It's perfect. My girl Eris said bring it on. She's ready for the get down. Eris comes in showing us her heavenly retracing spear. The phantasm starts us off with a transition into the waters and an immediate close-up. We then pan out to realize that Eris is the one that's steering the way with her weapon. On one side it appears that she's just stirring the water. On the other side she's actually stirring the enemy by manipulating the space that's in front of her. This is insane. By doing this, she sends all of her targets down the toilet bowl of hell, and then she enchants herself with their remains on top of that. The disrespect, by far one of the most unique, and one of the best things about it is that she does it without even trying. It really comes off like it's just another day to her. You got Elizabeth Bathory putting on for the entire lesbian pantheon. She blesses us with her fresh blood demoness. Absolutely love the way that this one kicks off as she uses her own weapon to summon her castle and then stands on top of it and delivers sonic waves in the form of an attack, just to give a nod at her hobby at singing. You then see multiple blasts come out of the castle to follow her waves and completely annihilate the target. There's also a full-on light show going in the background and a purple mist that you just can't look over. I'm not sure if you can tell, but this attention to detail is wild. The castle walls look like subwoofers. One of a kind things going on here, no doubt. Next up, we got the god-slaying Scathach, or as some people call her, Scathach, and those people should be thrown into the void. Here we got her using the Gaebulg alternative. She starts off by rushing straight at the enemy, knocking them into the air, and then sealing them with one of her Gaebulgs. Then she begins to charge up an additional hit while they're still stuck mid-air. You're not gonna like this one. And at that point, the person is forced to take the attack. The mana streaks that's flowing off of her spear, as well as the multiple zips of energy that you see go into the body as she's performing the attack. And then you have this sort of purple miasma surrounding the person's body to further address the fact that they've been binded in the sky. For our next phantasm, we have Ereshkigal with her bellows of Kur. She starts off rotating her spear with electrical energy coming from both the spear and her heels. She then plants her weapon and shoots out a flame of magical energy that hits everything in front of her. The background then makes a complete shift, a transition into bringing her enemies into the underworld, where she will receive a buff because it's her domain. And then depending on the timing of the phantasm, you can see an Easter egg of Hassan hanging out on the front ledge. Sometimes this can come out as Nitocris as well due to their affinity with depth. And once Ereshkigal has her enemy right right where she wants them. She then shoots multiple spears of magical energy out of the ground to take them out all at once. By far, easily one of the best phantasms for the Lancer class. Even today, there's nothing like it, especially with her bringing the enemy to a completely different territory, not just fading into a different scene, but physically bringing them into another area. You got the Easter egg that makes the phantasm different every time it's accomplished, and then the completely over the top energy use to showcase her level as a goddess. I need somebody to bring the heat. Son of the sun god Karna with his Vasavi Shakti. This phantasm has to be Hall of Fame no matter what form it comes in. We start off with him imbuing himself in a pool of flames. He starts to levitate in the air, and we even get a close-ups with some pans to match. The gem in the middle of his chest starts to radiate. The lighting is superb. You have the eyes start to interlock with the gem in his chest. His weapons start to release in the background in preparation for the attack. Several lights flashing across his body, and then a massive wave of flames start to cover up the entire screen, including him. He finally opens up his eyes in a very dramatic manner, both of them being their own separate color, charges up a ridiculously powerful blast, and then hits his opponent with an explosion of a lifetime. This phantasm is so good that I would argue that the original is better than the one in arcade, just because of how spontaneous and accurate it is, especially when it does the close-up and he first opens his eyes. It really just draws you in. One of the best duos around, no doubt. We got Ryoma hitting the surface with his wife, his phantasm being conquer the oceans of Wadasumi. We start off with his wife vanishing, and then the scene slowly starts to fade into black. He then appears on top of her in her dragon form, blue aura around her, with him holding his weapon out to the front of him. He kneels down while this starts to turn into streaks of light, and then we get a close-up as he's doing this, the two of them now being completely underwater. He then uses this to make her undergo a transformation. She jumps out of the water, Ryoma now standing on his own energy with this empowered look on his face, and straight up clothesline everybody that decided to get in their way. Once again, one of one. Love the way that he brings his two weapons together to form them as one, the way that she transforms, the way that they go underwater, the fact that his outfit changes 2 times, on top of him having the initial one, the cocky look that he's giving off while they both ride into the enemy's territory. Helps even more that I'm a fan of Ryoma anyway. This is incredible. With LB6 out the way, what better time to cover Melusine? Looking at her phantasms, for the first one we have the innocent light of the lake. She starts off by levitating in the air. You can see the blue radiance start to form around her body. We get a close-up. She then fills her weapon with magical energy and charges straight through her target, coming all the way out of the other side. For her second phantasm, we start off with her immediately soaring into the sky, going through multiple portals. She begins to go at a speed so fast that we start to lose her form, and all we can see is her energy. Then she transforms into her own version of Albion and fires a ridiculously powerful blast at all the enemies below her. For her third version of her phantasm, where are these coming from? Deviating from the second version, this time instead of transforming into a dragon, she decides to shoot her target outright and charges up a ridiculously powerful shot that drops her colossal weapon on all the enemies that's below her. And then for her final, you have her doing a combination of the two. When it comes to her original phantasm, I like it. Though it is typical in nature, it's not something that you would really get tired of seeing. The color scheme really complements her character, and it really shows off how fast she is on her own. Her phantasms in her second form are one of one. They can't be compared. Just the fact that they put so much effort into the scene change, into the variations, that alone puts her on another level. Her changing into a dragon, the careful attention to detail in her design, the angle that her phantasm is dropped. Yes, this is one of those. And then we got one of India's biggest tanks, the man himself, Bhima. The phantasm here being the son of the wind moment has arrived. The moment that the Phantasm starts, you begin to see Bhima levitate into the air. You have this green energy manifesting around him, and then he slowly starts to transform his entire body into a mecha suit. My man told Gundam, let me show you how it's really done. The suit being all gold with these green highlights, and then you have the green aura that's around him, and you can even see that his weapon has changed as well with the blue and red color scheme. He pushes the spear out to the front of him, and what is this? This man is toting a weapon of mass destruction. You see the electric mana pulsating around the energy ball that's coming from his spear as he absorbs the energy into the weapon and then drops it on top of his target as an energy blade. My guy increases his power even further. You can see fire flowing around him and the entire screen, and then he dashes in with the haymaker of a lifetime, completely devastating everything that's around him. Listen man, I know top 10 when I see top 10, and Bhima is not out here playing with you boys. My guy said let me do everything possible and then some. Complete change to the background, the flat out uniqueness of him turning into the mecha suit, the curveball of him absorbing the energy ball and then dropping the blade instead. You thought, and when he already had everybody else beat, my dude said let me hit him with it one more time. There's just simply nothing like it. Give this man his crown now.